Assalamualaikum guys, welcome back to our analysis of Islamic banking and finance. Prior to the banking crisis in the US, I was spending some time to further elaborate on the Tawaruq product, mostly pointing out to Tawaruq property financing. After which I get preoccupied with this banking crisis in California, Silicon Valley Bank, where there was a run on the bank leading to its disclosure or insolvency, and this run, continued with several other banks, signature banks, and also to some extent Credit Suisse in Europe. Then we would like to ask whether or not such bank run can take place in Islamic banking. Of course, we are not going to compare the situation in the US to Malaysia. What more to Islamic banking that constitute a small, component of the banking system. But then there is always a point to examine the withdrawal risk of the Islamic deposits, which is currently contracted on the concept of Tawaruq. And this would allow us to see to what extent the Islamic bank can be exposed to potential losses arising from the outflow of Islamic deposits. Of course, when we look at Silicon Valley Bank, we got a total value of deposit of about 190 billion USD, and we know well that on the first day 40 billion was withdrawn, and then the next day it was almost 100 plus billion was withdrawn also, and that caused the bank to be in big trouble. And of course that one, if you were to compare for example our largest Islamic bank in Malaysia, which is Maybank Islamic, and we can see that the total deposit September 2022 is about 203 billion ringgit, and that is equivalent to about 42 billion USD. So that is the deposit for the largest Islamic bank in Malaysia. And Silicon Valley Bank is the 25th largest bank in the USA, and yet we can see that their total deposit was at about $180 billion. And we can see that the bulk of the deposit in Silicon Valley Bank were coming from the corporates, coming from the business enterprises. And we know well that almost 97% of this deposit held by Silicon Valley Bank were not insured by the FIDC. We look at Malaysian for Maybank deposit, which is 203 billion ringgit, or about $42 billion. And we can see that the distribution of these depositors, we got about business enterprises 69 billion or 70 billion ringgit, and then individuals 57 billion ringgit, and then government agencies 44 billion. So we can see a very big different structure between Silicon Valley Bank and Maybank Islamic. So there is no basis for comparison, except the fact that we want to see the nature of the deposits in Islamic Bank, what kind of deposit that the Islamic Bank, that Maybank Islamic offers, and these are let's say we have saving deposits of 28 billion ringgit, murabaha, which is basically Tawaruq. This is commodity murabaha of 28 billion. For demand deposit, the commodity murabaha or Tawaruq is 40 billion plus. And then for term deposit, the murabaha or the Tawaruq is about 130 billion ringgit. So that will be 170 and 30, about 200 billion ringgit of Tawaruq deposits or commodity murabaha deposit, and the rest are coming from Qard, which is about 3 billion or 4 billion. So the concentration of the Tawaruq deposit is quite significant in Maybank Islamic, and of course this is a cause of concern. And we can see here that when we look at the this Tawaruq deposit offered by Maybank Islamic, so it is based on the contract of commodity murabaha or Tawaruq. And if you just dose down the various items in the PDS, so you can see that what is the product about, what is the Sharia concept applicable, and it is shown here that the Sharia concept applicable is commodity murabaha, which is Tawaruq, whereby a specific asset as the bank deems fit will be identified and used as underlying asset for the sale and purchase transaction between the bank and the customer. For CM trading purposes, the bank shall at all time be your non-executive agent to undertake the required commodity murabaha transaction related to the placement. Right? So we can see here, for example, the narrative of the Tawaruq fixed deposit, which is the opposite of the Tawaruq financing, whether the financing is related to property financing or personal financing. The murabaha or the commodity murabaha fixed deposit is actually the opposite of the Tawaruq financing. So for example, we are trying to see that this is a placement by the depositors. So in a sense that the bank is using leverage fund, supplied by the depositor. How much will be placed with the bank? Then we have to go through this process or sequencing of the Tawaruq transaction. So number one, the customer buy the CPO from vendor 1, and the customer sells the CPO on credit term to the bank at a selling price which is equal to the placement amount, the amount of deposit that the depositor intend to put, plus the profit that the bank will have to pay the depositor. For conventional banking, so you put a placement of 10,000 at 2% interest rate. That interest income would be the profit under the Islamic banking selling price equation over here, and then the bank will pay the customer the selling price comprising of the placement amount and profit at maturity. Right, that will be like, say, a year. If it is a 1-year deposit, so after a year, then the depositor will get the total placement plus the profit. Then for the bank to acquire or to secure the deposit, meaning that the cash to be placed with the bank, then the bank will sell the CPO to vendor 2, for cash, which is the money deposited in the fixed deposit account. So this is how the Tawaruq FD is transacted in the supply of leverage fund to the bank, for the bank to use it for the financing activity. So the bank will use this deposit fund to do property financing, to do personal financing, to do overdraft, to issue credit card, and thus we will see that how much risk the bank is taking in making the murabaha, in making the ijara, or in making the overdraft, would depend on how much capital that the bank has set, to support these loans or this financing funded by the deposit fund. So I will not want to go further into the discussion of the Tawaruq FD, but I think it will suffice. It will suffice to demonstrate how the CPO transaction were undertaken, and inshallah, in the next video, I will try to provide some example, some numerical example, to further, provide a concise presentation on this murabaha, on this commodity murabaha FD. Okay, I see you again. Don't forget to comment and to subscribe. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.